In today's video, I'm going to show gameplay for the new Goblin Cage evolution. Let's first quickly talk about the stats and the ability. So it's a one cycle evolution, and the Goblin Brawler has 10% more hit points when the evolved version is used, and the ability is the cage pool. So before getting out of the cage, the Goblin Brawler pulls enemy units into his cage and starts attacking them, dealing 306 damage per second. Alright, here we go, guys. Let's get into a couple matches with the Evolved Goblin Cage. Now, the cage obviously is mostly going to be good inside a beatdown deck. So the first game, we're going to be running E-Giant. I think it's going to pair very well with the Goblin Cage because already the Goblin Cage you sometimes see with the Electro Giant. Oftentimes, though, you see it with the cannon, so the Evolved Cage might end up replacing the cannon in a lot of E-Giant decks now. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the intro is even though the Evolved Cage does pull units in, it's not going to be able to pull in air units. So that is one thing to keep in mind, which means lava might end up being a very good counter to the Evolved Cage. Just something to think about. So pretty decent lightning value over there. The Phoenix is going to respawn though, and this is looking like it's actually going to be sort of a mirror match because it looks like this is going to be Electro Giant as well, and sure enough, E-Giant at the bridge. So we'll see how the Evolved Cage ends up faring against the Electro Giant, how much damage it deals to the E-Giant if it ends up getting pulled in to the cage. So let's see, Bowler is going to line up on the tower over here. And yeah, I mean, it's a one cycle evolution, so I feel like it's probably going to be pretty broken if I had to guess. It's definitely, I think my prediction is, it's going to be an above average evolution. I mean, it's really hard to know the strength of it compared to the other Evos, but all Evos are pretty good for the most part, especially at this state in the game. Even some of the worst Evos end up being pretty viable now. So with it being one cycle, I think that is a guarantee it's at least going to be somewhat decent, especially because the Brawler has 10% more hit points, the evolved version. So if they end up having to nerf this Evo, I think a good nerf to it would be just remove that health bonus that the Brawler gets, because a lot of people prefer when the Evos are just the ability and they don't get an extra stat boost. So I feel like that's kind of the ideal situation if they end up giving it a nerf. Just take that away, and that's a very easy thing to do. But let's see, E-Giant coming in here, Evolved Cage going to be in the middle. Let's see if the Electro Giant can get pulled in before the cage gets taken out. Void goes on top of it. Yeah, and there you go, it dies. So that is one thing to consider. I think that's one kind of downside of the Evolved Cage is there are some situations where the cage isn't going to get value, so you're not guaranteed to get use out of that ability. But one thing you are always going to get is that extra health that the Brawler has. And that's why I was saying when the Evos have a stat boost, I think that's the biggest thing that makes them broken, because that guarantees they're going to get value. 10% more health, you're getting that every single time, even though you might not be getting that cage effect every time, if that makes sense. So cage over here, Void ends up going right on the cage, and oh boy, this E-Giant is going to be a little difficult to deal with now. Get a NATO going here, and wait, maybe we don't even need the NATO? Nah, let's just go for it just in case. And yeah, we still have a good lead here though, which is pretty solid. So next time around, we do get the Evolved Cage once again, and we'll see if we can end up getting some more value out of it this time around. So we have it ready to go if an E-Giant ends up coming in, because of course that's going to be the most value we'll get out of it. Of course it could be pretty good on top of a Bowler too. Really anything, it's going to be able to take out even a Mega Knight and stuff like that. If the cage has a good chunk of its health, it will have enough time to kill something with a ton of hit points. So here we go. This time around, the E-Giant ends up getting pulled in, and as you can see, it dealt a ton of damage to it, but it didn't completely kill it. So the unit really needs to be inside of the cage for a good chunk of time, especially when it has a lot of health. So in my opinion, the ability isn't broken. I guess you guys can kind of leave your thoughts on what you think of the ability. I think the ability is actually quite balanced. I really don't think it's that broken, especially because it doesn't pull in air units. So it has a fair amount of counters, like ways you can stop it. So I honestly think I'm a pretty big fan of the ability for this evolution, because I think overall, just from what we've seen compared to the other Evos, it's not super ridiculous, and at the same time, it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's a unique feature. I feel like some of the other evolutions are a little bit, I feel like, kind of meh, but this one is, I would say pretty fun. I really feel like I can't complain at all with this evolution. Obviously, a lot of people in the community, complain about the evolutions. I think this one is really fun. I really do like this one, and that is going to be a nice win over here. End up winning in overtime. And in the second game, I'll show you guys it inside of a lava deck. I actually think the cage is going to be very good. Inside of lava, it might be used instead of the tombstone. So kind of like an E-Giant, we might see it instead of the cannon. I really think lava might be played with the cage once again. We actually used to see cage played with lava before inside of minor control type of lava decks with Skeleton Dragon's Flying Machine. You guys might remember that variation, but I think we could actually see it inside of Lava Loon now because the Tombstone already has been played less and less recently, and the cage with this Evo might be exactly what it needs to be played in lava once again. I would not be surprised. And also, like I already said, because the cage doesn't pull in air units, I think that if the cage is really good, lava is going to be really strong in this meta as well. We'll go Void here on top of the Magic Archer. The Void actually doesn't kill Magic Archer anymore. As you guys can see, it needs 2 strikes because the main strike of the Void ended up getting that damage nerf. I still think the Void is going to be very good because it's still going to be played a lot. I feel like it's a versatile spell, and also with it dealing more damage when there's a bunch of units clumped together, I feel like that really helps it out when you're using it on top of swarms. So I think in some situations it's actually going to be better when you're against Beatty and swarm decks. It's just going to be worse against beatdown decks. So wow, Inferno Drag got a lot of damage on the tower over there. Minions to clean up the Bush Goblins. Maybe going for guards would have been a little better, but I think that's okay. This is still a very, very good situation. And oh wow, the minion even got a shot, even though the Magic Archer was played. It was kind of missing his shots over there. So I'm thinking like cage could be decent on the Magic Archer, but it's probably better to save it for something a bit more valuable. Maybe the Demolisher, for example, something like that. So we pretty much have the left tower pretty much guaranteed, and we can go cage on the... Wait, did I just... Oh, it's not in range. that is not good. Okay, well, it just went to complete waste. Yeah, that's one thing you have to be a little bit mindful of. Then that's another thing. In a way, I'm kind of glad that that happened because, well, not really glad, but it's a nice excuse for now. I can explain, because of that radius, ranged units are also a very good counter to the cage. So, for example, if you go in for something like an Electro Wizard or a Musketeer, for example, it's never going to get pulled in by the cage because it outranges the circle, the radius next to the cage, where it's actually able to... That's the radius of the cage or the brawler being able to pull in units. So that's one thing to consider. And that's why I could definitely see the cage being played inside of NATO decks a lot, because you're actually going to be able to pull units in to the cage when they're outside of the radius, if the unit isn't one that actually walks up to it. So these are all going to be things to consider when you're running the cage, when you're thinking of how to have good synergy. And there we go. This time around, it does pull in the Demolisher. And let's see, we have a really big counter push coming in here, but the Bush Goblins I had to get something down for. Oh, wait, Inferno Drag, if it locks on the tower, that should be game. Yeah, there we go. That is going to be a nice win. So let me know what you guys think of the Evolved Goblin Cage. Personally, I think this is a pretty fun evolution. It doesn't look ridiculously broken, but it does seem like it'll be pretty strong, especially against beatdown decks. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. You can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game. And thanks again until next time, guys.